This podcast is not sponsored or supported by any business or organization. The views reflected on these podcast episodes are my own. Please be aware I am not a medical expert, travel agent, or any other kind of expert. Hey everyone, welcome to the Eat, Explore, Love podcast. I'm Ashley. This podcast is based off of my blog of the same name, Eat, Explore, Love. It talks about the unique challenges in traveling around the world when you have celiac disease. Due to sort of popular demand, I decided to also record a podcast to delve a little deeper into my travels and the lessons learned along the way. Hi everyone, welcome to Eat, Explore, Love, the podcast. Today we are meeting with self-image scientist Leanne Ellington. She is here to help you overcome your emotional hangups to ensure a healthier relationship with food and your body. She is an absolute ray of sunshine on a cloudy day, to be totally corny about it, and I hope I somehow become best friends with her because she is the sweetest and nicest person I think I've ever met. So hopefully you get that feeling as well in listening to this episode. Enjoy! So, hi Leanne, welcome to Eat, Explore, Love, the podcast. I'm really excited for our conversation today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm grateful to be here.
So I guess I have done a little bit of research on you, so I have an idea of who you are, but I would love to hear in your own words. Who are you?
Yeah, such a loaded question, right? Well, the Cliff Notes version of how I became the woman that I am today, I was actually an obese, overweight, sedentary couch potato child into teenagerhood, into adulthood. And then in my mid-20s, I had hit my first enough is enough point, and I went on and lost close to 100 pounds, but I did it in all of the, some of the right ways and all of the wrong ways. I, unbeknownst to me, actually gave myself disordered eating and a horrible self-image and body image to get there, but I didn't even know that that was a thing. And it wasn't really until I healed my relationship with food, healed my relationship with my body, and discovered the nervous system through it wasn't intentional. I had a debilitating spine injury that I now endearingly call the cost of skinny, because I really do believe I could have prevented it. It was part of the disorder. I was so focused on getting, air quotes, fit and lean and toned and all those things that I didn't listen to my body, and I ended up needing major spine surgery. But the surgery was a success, but it gave me a lot of neurological complications on the other side of it, the sensory side of things, physiological pain that didn't make sense. But it was such a gift, because it caused me to go down the road of studying the nervous system, not knowing that the emotional, mental, nervous system was even a thing. And that's really what helped me bridge together the solution that wasn't available to me when I most needed it, and that I needed the most. And that's really what brings me to what I do now, which is I help women and teens really release themselves from that food and body prison, take a self-image and brain-based and nervous system-centric approach to their healing, and heal it in months, so that they're not spending years in therapy trying to figure it out. So that's kind of the Cliff Notes version.
I loved all that you said, and there's so much to unpack there. Starting off with, I've had a lot of these conversations before with guests of coming from the perspective of struggling with weight. And most people, I've always been on the other end of the spectrum where I needed to gain weight. I was always severely underweight. And hopefully in these conversations, we're all meeting together, because I think it gives a similar type of trauma, whether you're underweight, overweight, just coming from a different origin point.
1,000%, yeah.
So for me, one of the things that you mentioned was food journaling. And when you are being diagnosed with food dietary restrictions like celiac or any other type of thing, they want you to food journal. And that was the one thing I never followed my doctor's advice on, because I grew up in a family that was very big on appearance and how you looked, and that I was praised for how skinny I was, and that messed with my head a little bit because I was like, I'm sick though. Why is it good to be sick? And I didn't understand that as a kid, of why was everybody wanting to look like me when they look healthy. Even if they were overweight, at least they had something to them.
Absolutely.
And I never did the food journaling because I was afraid that I have like type A plus personality, and I was going to be too obsessive with that. So let's just jump right into the deep end of this conversation. Yeah. What is advice that you give when people are hearing from their doctors that they have to track what they eat? How do you help people prevent that from becoming unhealthy?
Absolutely. Well, I can't even tell you how many people have come to me after they've been to doctor after doctor and therapist after therapist. And the first thing I say is like, you have to become your own advocate, because nobody will or can know your body, your brain, your heart, your mind better than you can. And so part of it is like, I think we get into that place where we have so much confusion that we're looking for somebody to just give us some certainty, give us some clarity. And we're kind of latching on to other people's opinions. And then what happens is there's too many cooks in the kitchen, right? And then we, by default, don't know how to take ownership of our own health. Yeah. Right. So the first thing I would say is like, and I'm not dogging any doctors or medical professionals or anything like that, but we have to be the ultimate filter that we put our thought processes through and see if it aligns and see if it makes sense. Yeah. The other thing is that anything can be used as a tool or a weapon. Right. And so when it comes to tracking, for example, or food journaling specifically, I know a lot of people are die hard about like, you have to do that in order to get the data. And it's like, well, yes, absolutely. In an ideal world, I'd be able to track and measure and weigh and count, and it will not become this, weapon of control and a weapon of restriction and weapon of, micromanagement and obsession. Right. And so it's not the food journal that's the problem. It's who we're being when we're using it. And so I think we have to put it through our own kind of filter of wisdom and discernment and say, like, am I able to use this as a tool? Will it move me towards health, which is obviously the intention of the medical professional, right? Or is it going to move me away from health into furthering the disorder? And and the same with a scale, the same with, weighing yourself, tracking, whatever it is. Netflix can be a tool or a weapon. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's about really understanding our relationship with it. And it's okay to say, you know what, I hear you. And I hear that advice that in an ideal world, you'd want to see what I'm tracking and journaling. But right now it's actually doing more harm to me than good. Yeah. Is there a workaround? Is there something that we can meet me halfway? And always advocating for yourself. But part of that is you have to have the awareness to know what your, air quote triggers are.
And while you're saying that, I saw one of the terms or labels that you gave yourself was a self-image scientist. So does all of that play into that label? What does that label mean to you? And how does that branch out into you helping others?
Absolutely. I believe that we all should become mad scientists, first of all, because again, otherwise we're going to leave our transformation and our health to the discretion of other people telling us who we are and what we should do and all of the things. So if we take on this idea of it's one big experiment to figure out, it's like one big long-term experiment, like a lifelong experiment, but then also it's a series of short experiments to identify what works for me, what doesn't work for me, what works maybe in the short run, what doesn't work in the long run. But I feel like experimentation is the antidote to perfectionism, because anyone who struggles with food in their body, I'm raising my hand, I'm sure we've dabbled in the whole perfectionistic mentality. And it's like, that doesn't exist. And that can be really binding and really unhealthy and almost sabotage us, right? Because we assume failure if one thing went awry. But if you look at it from this experimentation mentality, right? Everything's an experiment. It just becomes data. Oh, that didn't work. Instead of labeling it as a failure, it's like, okay, that's data of something that didn't work. So that's in terms of like the scientific side of things for everyone, right? But where the self-image comes into play, right? I truly believe that you personally could be given the air quotes perfect system or plan or program through experimentation, right? But if we don't identify those weeds in the garden of your mind that are causing you to think and act and feel and behave the way that you are, or not even use the perfect plan, or assume failure before you start, or call yourself, fat, skinny, unlovable, shouldn't, ugly, whatever words, fill in the blank we all use, those self-judgments, the shame labels, right? If we don't identify that and address the self-image, the goggles with which we are seeing ourselves through, the lens and the story that we're stepping into that then becomes an identity, because you can't out strategize, you can't out journal, you can't outsmart your self-image and the wiring in your brain. And so that's why I'm a self-image scientist. I'm on an ongoing journey, and I invite all of my clients to become their own mad scientists as well, because that's how we truly play the long game and make this a forever conversation, and we get out of the short-term gratification trap. But then we also have this ongoing series of experiments that gives us permission. It's a permission-based thought process that allows us to just go explore and see what works for us. And sometimes things work for us for a season, and sometimes they don't work for a reason, but that's for us to discover, and it's our own personal, individualized experience.
I love everything that you just said, and I feel like I try to tell people that I love similar things to what you're saying, or explain my own experience, how those things have manifested, and people are just not hearing it. So maybe you, as a messenger for the people in my life that are listening to this podcast, it will maybe land. So I love that you said all those things. It's very validating.
If that's the case. Yeah, absolutely.
So my biggest question to you is, it seems for living a healthier lifestyle, it seems step one is mental health stuff needs to get worked out and on the journey of living a healthier life physically as well. And I always find it intriguing that the labels that we have in our head are usually labels that start in our childhoods. A big example for me is my family, parents included, though my mother will be very upset with me for saying this, there's a perception that I am controlling. So I've had that label put upon me, and I've gone through enough therapy to know what it really is and that it's not that. But that label sticks with me in the back. It's like a constant buzzing in the back of my head as I go through life, and it impacts everything that I do, including the food journaling. So is there any advice that you would give to parents nowadays to be like, hey, you have kids, maybe I feel like I'm watching This Is Us again for the upteenth time, and I'm noticing that they're starting a pattern of showing with the character Kate, of when she was little, of how all that stuff started and how everybody in the family spoke to her about it as a little girl. Is there anything that you could say to parents, mental health wise, physical health wise, of how to, in a healthy way, communicate with their children about who they are as people?
Yeah, no, it's such a great question. And, you're right. Like we are walking around with a perception of ourselves. And oftentimes it gets formed by the perception of others, but then a lot of times it's our perception of other people's perception.
Yes.
Right. So it's this very mixed bag of our self-image becomes these stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves. And some of it's real, and some of it's, again, we perceived it, assumed it, whatever. Right. And so for any parent that's listening, we want to keep that in mind. These children, and especially in around, puberty is when that social brain starts developing. I talk a lot about the anterior cingulate cortex. It's that part of the brain that has perception of other people's opinions. Mm-hmm. It's that social brain. It's like, am I accepted? Am I different? Am I weird? Am I good? Am I bad? All those things. Mm-hmm. It's also ironically where we use a lot of coping mechanisms, sugar, food, Netflix, whatever it is. But that being said, it's developing, right? So just having that awareness that they are going to, regardless of how air quotes perfect of a parent you are, they're going to have this perception based manifestation of their self-image. And so who as parents can you do and who can you be as parents to really shield them in the right direction? And this is going to sound a little bit counterintuitive, but I work with teens all the time. And of course, their parents are the ones that first come to me. And one of the things I'll ask them is I'll say, if they're, worried about their children's relationship with food or their body or their self-image, I'll ask them, I'm like, and there's no judgment, but like, what's your relationship with food like? What, what are you modeling? And not in a judgment way, but part of it is like, I could literally incubate this teenager and have them transform their self-image and transform their identity and their relationship with food. And then they go back and they're witnessing their mom calling themselves fat in the mirror, or saying, you can't wear that, you look like a sausage, this is a true story, this happened, or saying, you can't eat that, that's bad, that's wrong, and putting all these labels. It doesn't matter how much work this child does or how self-identified they are. Mm-hmm. So part of it is like, I really invite the parents to kind of clean up their own side of the street first, because a lot of times they're projecting problems onto their children that they themselves have to solve. I really think it needs to start at the top. And I know that's not like pretty and wrapped up in a bow, and it's not always easy to hear, but I truly believe it comes from the top. Now, that being said, from that place, you're modeling what you're modeling. So the best way you can help your child, because I don't believe that a parent can really coach a child. They're like in their game, right? There's some sort of barrier that the child won't really fully receive that kind of healing from their parent. It needs to be from someone else. So in that case, the best thing a parent can do is model the kind of confident self-image, the kind of, initiating identity around things that are not quantifiables, like weight and what you ate, or how, just how your grades are in school, or these things that are achievement based, right? Really getting to the essence of who you are. Like, oh my, like, imagine if your mom was like, you know what, you're so compassionate. Like, I love how compassionate you are and how much you care about other people. Oh my gosh, let's talk, like, teaching you gratitude. You know what I mean? So these are the things, but then we hear like, no, you're a control freak, or you shouldn't eat that, or whatever. And those are the things that become our identity, and we just bring them with us into adulthood. So it's a big subject, but that's kind of like the cliff notes of how I kind of view it.
I think that's incredible. And, I hope that parents respond well, because I feel like certain generations of folks are like gung-ho to hear that and totally on our page. And then there's a generation before that that's not so receptive to hearing that they may have to clean up their side of the street. And I wonder what the next generation is going to tell us that we did wrong and trying to make it better for them and all that other stuff.
Yeah. For sure. And I think it just depends. I've had that message received very well. I work with in my practice, I work with a lot of women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. And then I work with a lot of women in their 40s and 50s that have teenagers, or 30s that have teenagers, so it just depends. And honestly, sometimes it's the right thing, wrong time. And sometimes it's not and whatever help they need and support they need, I hope they find the right person that sends them the message that lands with them, Yeah. So, but yeah, it's a hard truth sometimes, but I'd rather hear the hard truth than walk around kind of sleepwalking in a non-reality, and then it harming my children, Yeah.
Is part of the reframing things for whether it's teenagers, adults, such whatever, that you focus on more of being healthy as opposed to losing weight? Is it that the approach that you take and communicate with those that come and seek your help?
Yeah, great question. So it's that is almost a secondary conversation, but it's such a powerful distinction. So part of it too is like, yes, a lot of the women that come to me, they think they have a weight problem. They think they have a willpower problem, a self-sabotage problem. And one of the things I show them is like, actually, no, you just learned a broken model. The eat less, move more, like willpower, restrict, control, all of that. It's not a sustainable way of living. It's not how we're supposed to live. And there's a freedom-based mentality that you can live that actually, gets you health. Because a lot of people, they hear the word freedom and they're like, great, that means carefree abandonment. I'm going to go gain a bunch of weight, lose my health, right? So there is that happy medium. But yes, it is prioritizing that version of health over weight loss. And here's the thing too. I think a lot of women have learned, especially with social media, that it's like, oh, I'm not allowed to want to lose weight. Like wanting to lose weight is bad or vain or whatever. And it's like, no, you're allowed to want to do that as well. You're allowed to have both. But that's what I invite you into is like, make sure you have both, because a lot of women are chasing weight loss at the expense of their health and at the expense of their happiness, and they're having neither. They're not losing weight and they're not happy. So that's why it's like the model's not working. So yes, we need to prioritize like the healing cycle first, and it can take months. It doesn't have to take years, right? If you hit it on the head. But the other thing too, I think about health is I feel like the biggest thing I have to do with my clients is help them redefine their definition of health. Because my definition of health was eat less, move more. My definition of health was chase skinny at the expense of my health, right? Yeah. My definition of health was harder, faster, more. My definition of health was no pain, no gain. And all of these things and were a disaster for me, right? And then I also learned like carbs are bad, fat is bad, calories are bad, looking in the mirror and blinking is bad. Who knows? Like you learn these really, versus like what does the brain say healthy is? What does the nervous system say healthy is? What's a healthy heart, a spirit, a soul? And let's have a healthy relationship with food and a healthy relationship with your body. So it is this 3-dimensional thing, but yeah, you've got to prioritize that over weight loss, or else you're going to be chasing your tail. So yeah.
Yeah. Is that what your stressless eating system is essentially? How does that all work?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way I describe stressless eating is it's kind of like a 16-week incubator where we, again, without drawing it out for years, we do it in an incubated fashion. And the way I kind of describe it, it's like learning a new language. Because if you're anything like me and you learn this eat less, move more, or whatever disorder we learn, it's the language that we've spoken for a lot of times decades or forever. So we have to kind of learn a new language. It's like a new paradigm, because it's like, Leanne, you're telling me like I don't have to obsessively track and think about food and all of that. And it's like, well, yeah, like, but I don't even know what that looks like. Right. Because if you speak Spanish, you don't know what it's like to speak French. Right. So the way I describe stressless eating is it's taking 16 weeks to break yourself out of the food and body prison, heal your relationship with food, heal your relationship with your body, but without focusing on all the things that you hate. But that being said, it's part strategy and part story. So in terms of the strategy side of things, I teach them a system of thinking that will replace the diet mentality, but a system of thinking that gets easier the more you practice it, and you get better at it the more you practice it, so that you can practice it less and less, and it does just become who you are. Versus dieting or obsessing, we never get good at it. It never becomes who we are, right? But that's the strategy side of it, but that's not enough, because again, we can't out strategize and out logic and reason like deeper emotional struggles. So there's also the self-image and beliefs side of it, because again, I could straight up give you the stressless eating strategy that I teach my clients, but if we don't go identify that self-image story or the weeds in the garden of your mind that are, again, assuming failure, sabotaging you, calling you unworthy, unlovable, whatever it is, you will always end up right back where you are, because you end up back in alignment with your identity and your self-image. So it's really got to be both. It's got to be both of those things, but with an experimentation component, because what works for me might not work for you. It's got to be individualized. It's got to be bio-individualized, and we've got to identify each person's unique success recipes, because, and when I say recipes, it's like thoughts, beliefs, behaviors, habits that work in your real world life, because we don't live in a bubble of grilled chicken and broccoli and food journals, right? Yeah. So that's really the nutshell version of it. But a lot of times too, people think like, Leanne, I've been this way for so long. Is this going to be really painful? Am I going to have to go unhash all of my old trauma? And what I say to that is like, no, most people have psychoanalyzed their past to death. And they don't need to do it anymore. They're very aware of how they became the way they are, but a lot of times they don't have the tools to actually move past it. Yeah. And so what I do is I give them the right now solution-oriented tools, so that they don't bring their past into their future, and that the history doesn't repeat itself, and they're not, again, bringing that old identity with them. So it's part, psychology, physiology, neuroscience meets streets of the hard knocks, meets self-imaging, and that identity work. And then for those that do have a faith life or a spiritual life, I invite them to add that in as well, because they'd be compartmentalizing themselves if they don't. But it's not a faith-based program, but for those people that do have faith as a big part of their life, I invite them to bring that on board as well if they choose.
There were a couple of things that you said there that stood out to me of starting with the emotional impact will help, and moving past, making sure past doesn't become prologue in a sense, with the key of keeping the weight off or / living that healthier body type that you need the way that it is. I want to bring that into a conversation about not men versus women and like women are better than men, but I've noticed, and I'm making generalizations here, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this. The men in my life have no problem losing the weight, but they have a really hard time just staying that way, or they have to put in a ton of work to keep it that way. And the women in my life have a hard time losing it in general. But the women in my family have just not gotten past that point yet, unfortunately, of just trying to lose the weight. But I also think emotions have an impact in that. But do you feel that men, because they have been taught from a young age to kind of not talk about feelings and emotions and thoughts and not be self-reflective in any way? I'm not saying that all men are like this. I'm saying that they're taught that way, to be that way. Is that part of the problem that you see for men as well? Maybe worse than women have it? Or how do you notice that play out?
No, it's such a great conversation. One of the things that I've kind of been semi-obsessed about is studying the differences between the male and the female brain. And what we know is that 99% of our genetic coding is the same, or male to female. And it's that 1% difference that makes all the difference that you were just describing. There's a couple parts of the brain that are different in the male and female, but the one that I want to highlight is, I actually talked about it a minute ago. It's called the anterior cingulate cortex, but we can just call it the social brain. It's that part of the brain. There's so many things that happen in that brain. We detect, it's our emotional pain center. Okay. It's also our painkiller receptor part of our brain, right? Okay. So we have like emotional pain, physical pain, but also pleasure and pain, right? So that's all being experienced and manifested in other parts of the brain, but predominantly the ACC, the anterior cingulate cortex. But then also what I think about other people and what they think about me, and if I'm received, if I'm accepted, if I'm outcast, if I'm isolated, and then the way we use coping mechanisms and numbing because of the pain and pleasure receptors in that part of the brain. So the interesting thing about it is that part of our brain is bigger and more active in the female brain than it is in the male brain. And so we are actually wired to be more emotional, right? That's why women have, and this is this is a 2019 study, use these numbers. I'm sure it's higher now, but women have 50 to 75% more incidences of depression and 50 to 75% more incidences of anxiety than the male. And that's because, again, that emotional pain center, we are looking to see whether we are connected, accepted, cared for way more than the male brain. And so how does that play in coping mechanisms? How does that play in how we perceive our bodies, right? Because again, we talked about it before, that food's not the problem. It's our thoughts about food that causes us to feel a certain way. Because I can eat a cookie with peace and calm and being present, right? Versus that same cookie can cause me shame and, cognitive dissonance and guilt and all of these things. Same cookie, two different experiences of that same cookie because of what I'm thinking about the cookie while I'm eating it. But then what you don't see is there's this neurological and metabolic cascade that happens based on those two thoughts. So if I'm eating a cookie in shame and cognitive dissonance, it's going to put me in that fight or flight branch of my nervous system, right? I'm going to be producing all of those, stress hormones. I'm going to be, physiologically fight or flight. I'm going to be, my endocrine system, my respiratory system, my adrenals, all of it, right? On the flip side, if I'm eating a cookie and I'm present with it and I'm calm and I'm peace and there's no drama about it, I'm in that relaxed parasympathetic branch of my nervous system, and all systems are go and firing metabolically, hormonally, all of it, right? So it's what we see and it's what we don't see. But yeah, we as women are wired to have more emotional relationship with food because of the size of our anterior cingulate cortex, and it's more active. And the same thing when it comes to our relationship with our bodies and emotions in general. Now, in terms of how quickly and not quickly men and women lose weight, the physiological side of it, like that's the wild, wild west. There's so many different factors, especially like, BMR and, how much you're burning and genetics and all those things. And there's the nurture and nature side of that. But on the emotional, like why it manifests the way it does, that's why there's so many more women that have this struggle than men.
Do we feel that men would maybe perhaps have an easier time of keeping the weight off, though, if they did address that emotional part of like why all the things that we've been talking about applying to women? Are we able to apply all of what you just said to men as well? Or is it just that you take a different approach, same result, but you just take a different road to help them as well?
Yeah, I actually, my program was actually designed mainly for women, but I've had a few men that have been like, I want to work with you. And I'm working with a male right now. The system of thinking is exactly the same. What changes, I believe, like what makes the difference between like the, who makes this a lifelong pursuit and who goes back on that bounce back. I think it literally comes down to the conversation that you have in your head before you go down that road. Okay. Right? It's like a before conversation rather than an after conversation where you draw that line in the sand and you say, I'm no longer willing to be a prisoner to food. Okay. I'm no longer willing to live on this short-term Band-Aid, roller coaster. I'm ready to heal my brain and I'm ready to like get right within my brain. Right. And I think when you start that journey and you commit to that, and one of the things I tell my clients is I'm like, that's a lifelong commitment. It's just this lifelong mastery, but it gets better and easier the more you do it. Mm-hmm. Right. But it's not this like one and done thing. It's like the way I do it is I intensively incubate them for 16 weeks so that they can then just have it for the rest of their lives, but they go practice it the rest of their lives and they have it. But I think what really it comes down to in this independent of whether you're male or female is it's making a decision, deciding that you're no longer willing to live as that version of yourself and stepping into the identity of the version of you that would have that health, that would have that relationship with food, that would have that body, that would not go back to their old ways of being, you know?
Yeah. Do you mind if I ask why you built the business specifically for women? Is it because of the stigma with women and that they're so much harder on themselves traditionally that you felt that you'd be more helpful in that space? Or you're a woman, so it's easier for us to go down that rabbit hole? Or what's your reason for?
Great question. Yeah. So, well, first and foremost, I am my own first client first. Like I was my own first, experiment and still am my own experiment. And so what really got me when I started studying the nervous system, one of the things that got me really intrigued was the differences between the male and female brains. And Dr. Leanne Ellington, she's a doctor, a neuroscientist she was at, it was either Harvard or Yale, in the 80s, and she raised her hand in class and was like, where are all the statistics about about females? And they were like, oh, we don't have any studies on females. So she went and devoted her life to studying the female brain, and I consider her one of my teachers. So I really went narrow and deep down, understanding what about my female brain is what really helped me overcome this. Now, it helped me understand the male brain as well, right? But because we are wired differently and so specific to it, and there's a ton of people doing, talking to the general masses, I decided to go narrow and deep and really speak to women. And rather than be all things to all people, really go narrow and deep and serve the females. But again, every once in a while I have a man that comes up to me and is like, I've listened to your podcast or I've been reading your emails or whatever. I want to work with you. And I do. But generally speaking, it's catered towards women.
That makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned your podcast, which I'm going to bring up in a second. But my last question to you about your program is you keep mentioning that it's 16 weeks. I'm just curious because you're a mad scientist in your own words. Is there something magical about that 16-week number that's the reason your program is that long?
Yeah, it's actually what happens is I've just been doing this for 15 years, and I've learned as people go through it. It used to be 12 weeks. And I added in a second experimentation phase for my clients that made it 16 weeks. So, but what is special about it is when you incubate yourself intensively. Okay. One of the things that I like, timing is everything. So if my clients are, about to go off on vacation for 3 weeks and whatever, I'm like, hey, let's do it when you get back. Like, it's really about hunkering down and making it your number one priority intensively rather than dragging it out for years. We hit it on the head in 16 weeks, right? Yeah. So it's about that commitment factor. It's about that immersion. There's a reason why a lot of language programs, they do these immersions where you go and you immerse yourself in the language. There's just something to be said about it when you immerse yourself in something like that.
I love that. So now let's talk about your podcast. I have that you have Outweigh and What's God Got to Do with It. So do you still currently do both of those podcasts? Is there a focus on one? Tell me about all of it.
Yeah. So I used to have my own podcast, and then iHeartMedia discovered me and put me on their network. And so both of these are iHeart podcasts.
Nice.
And so Outweigh is really, around what we talked about today, which is helping women really break out of the food and body prison and really heal their relationship with food, heal their relationship with their bodies, but by changing their thoughts, and teaching them no, you don't need another kick butt plan. You don't need another diet. It's about your thinking. And so really Outweigh aims, to really break the stigma around disordered eating and eating disorders as well. And really anyone who struggles with food and body. And it's about helping them take a practical approach to the whole self-love side of this. Because a lot of times it feels very ambiguous. It's oh, just love yourself no matter what. But it's well, how do I do that? So we put the science behind it and really give people a dose of encouragement for anyone navigating thoughts and behaviors in the food and body space. So that's called Outweigh. It's every Saturday. You can find it on iHeart or wherever podcasts are streamed. And then, my other podcast also with iHeart is called What's God Got to Do with It? So this was what I would describe as a God thing because I am total side note. I grew up Jewish. I'm a bacon-loving, Hebrew-speaking Jew. But it was never a source of faith for me. It was never a connection to God. And I went searching and seeking, and I walked into a non-denominational church in Nashville, Tennessee, and just had a radically transformational experience. But there was nothing there that really met me where I was, because again, I was a scientist. I was like, if I can't see this on a brain scan, I don't know what it means, right? So I was skeptical and cynical, but I was open-minded and wanted to believe, and it transformed my life. And so, you know, the What's God Got to Do with It podcast is really, it's meant to be spiritual food for people that need their heart and soul to be fed. And it's about cutting through the noise and helping people feel transformed and uplifted, but without feeling judged, right? And then we do fuse a lot of neuroscience with faith. There's actually a lot of research about faith and neuroscience and how they intersect. So a lot of the food and body struggle side of things, but how it directly connects with neuroscience and faith. And that's What's God Got to Do with It. And that new episodes of that air every Tuesday. So that's over on iHeart and anywhere podcasts are streamed as well.
I really love that because it's super different and it makes sense to me. It's actually, every time I traveled and lived in Europe for 9 months, and the biggest existential inner crisis that I had was where I stood on faith and I'm still sorting through all of it, but that's you. And when I go to Nashville next, if you're still in Nashville, when we're going to go and have drinks and we're going to have a discussion about it, because I would love to hear more of your thoughts. And this podcast isn't quite the forum for that, but would love to just have a conversation on the side.
Absolutely. Yeah. And especially because with my clients, when we talk about identity, you know, a lot of them that do have a faith, and that's why I say, like, if you have a faith life, we can't talk about identity without inviting that into, you know, so, and it's, and even for anybody who doesn't have a connection with faith life, if we're talking about this conversation of unconditional love and unconditional acceptance, it's like a lot of people don't know what that even feels like or looks like. And so for me, it was like, okay, God, I'm going to borrow your eyes. Like, show me what you see, show me who I am, show me what's possible. You know, and when I did that, it's like miracles unfolded and I could not talk about it. And then iHeart was like, hey, let's do a podcast about it. So here we are.
That's awesome when opportunity meets passions and then you go from there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. True that.
So we're approaching the end of our time, and I'm very thankful and appreciative to be able to chat with you today. It was a wonderful conversation. I always ask the same rapid fire questions at the end of every episode. So is it okay if I take you through those?
Yeah, let's do it.
Perfect. What is your favorite food city that you've ever visited?
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, Nashville has a great food scene. Yes. But I would probably say Bangkok, Thailand. I haven't been in probably 10 years, but like, it was just the street food, the restaurant food. Like, it's just it's a great place if you know, it's obviously Thai food, but Bangkok is a fun one. And I would also say Tel Aviv, Israel. Both of those great food quality cuisine.
Amazing. Do you prefer a vacation that requires you to be active or relax?
Ooh, I just came back from a vacation with my husband where I said, hey, babe, are we going to work out on vacation? He was like, no, we're not. It's vacation. And I was like, okay. And so I just had a vacation that was just like total, like, it was relaxation. And I did some like active recovery and movement, but I feel like it was just so good for me. So I probably a few years ago would have said active, but I think I would go with relaxing. After what I just experienced. I'm a changed woman.
It's always nice when someone forces you to sit down and do nothing.
It was so good for me. Yeah.
What is the city where you learned the most about yourself?
Ooh, definitely Nashville. I moved here after a series of quarter life crises. It's where I found God. It's where I met my husband. It's where I really redefined who I am. And I believe, I mean, I moved here when I was almost 30, but I feel like I was a girl when I moved here, and I feel like I became a woman, even though I was 30 already, but it was very transformational for me.
I'm turning 30 within the next couple months, so it's still young. 30 is still young.
30s are, I think the 40s are the best so far. So I'll we'll keep each other posted.
Yes, keep you posted for sure. And then, of course, where can the people find you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you want to know more about, what I teach, which is turning off the part of your brain that is obsessed with food, or obsessed with your weight, and rewire your brain for peace of mind and freedom, I've literally just peeled back the curtain and walked you through the exact system that I teach my clients themselves to really just heal from that all or nothing diet mentality, for good, but without, restricting themselves or punishing their bodies, and definitely without words like macros and low carb or calorie burn. It's not about that at all. So you can find that over on stresslesseating.com. That's where you'll find the masterclass. But you can also Google stalk me. LeanneEllington.com is where you'll find out about everything, my books, my podcasts, all the things. So stresslesseating.com for the masterclass, and LeanneEllington.com if you just want to find out more about all of me.
Perfect. And we will make sure all those links are in the show notes for the podcast when this airs. So hopefully we'll get some traction over to you. I'm really excited about that.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you.
Such a pleasure chatting with you as well. Thank you so much, Leanne.
Thank you.
As always, thank you so much for listening to this conversation. I hope Leanne gave you a little something to inspire you to move forward. If not, please go check out her program. It sounds like it's life-changing and life-affirming. So I recommend everybody to live a happy, healthy lifestyle. I think it's so silly when people are so concerned about the number on the scale, because to me that's totally irrelevant if you're happy and if your doctor is saying that you're healthy, because what looks healthy on one person or unhealthy on one person is healthy on another. There is no one size fits all for your body type. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. As always, till next time. Thank you for joining me this week for all the fun journeys and lessons learned on my big adventure called life. For more information on the different cities discussed, check out the blog posts on hieatexplorelove.com, posted every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. If you have any questions or fun stories to share, feel free to reach out at hieatexplorelove@gmail.com. Until next week, remember to eat well, explore the world, and love yourself. See you next time. This episode is produced, scripted, and edited by me, Ashley. Special thanks to Sarah Mientka.